All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Worldhoppers channel. This is a collaborative booktube channel where we mostly talk about sci-fi fantasy books. Sometimes we talk about other genres, and all of our proceeds go to charity. So today I have some sci-fi readers. They read other things as well, but today we're doing the mid-year book freakout tag sci-fi edition. We did the fantasy edition with some other booktubers recently, I think last week. So this time we're doing a sci-fi specific version of the same tag. And today I've got some lovely people here who have all been on the channel before. Their channels are all linked down in the description box, so you can go check them out after you watch this video. But this tag has a lot of questions, so we're gonna get right on into it. And for the record, I am not gonna be answering a lot of the questions. If you don't know, I am 8 months pregnant and I just haven't been reading a lot this year. I've read 19 books. I'm like 5 books behind my Goodreads goal, which is like worse than I've done in a long time in many years, but it's okay. And I read 3 sci-fi books this year. That's it. So I'm not answering a lot of these questions. There's a couple about anticipated releases that'll answer, but mostly it's going to be these guys answering the questions. So the first question is, best book you have read so far? And Angela, if you want to start, and then we'll go clockwise.
Well, this is going to shock no one here probably, but it's The Best of All Possible Worlds by Karen Lord, the book that solidified that I need to read everything by Karen Lord. So this is one of these like softer, optimistic sci-fi books. So like if you like Becky Chambers, I highly recommend checking this out. I think it was published in 2014 or something. So it's like a backlist book that like I just discovered because I love this author so much. And it's so good. It starts with kind of a sad premise where like you have a planet that's no longer allowed to be occupied by its people. They've been displaced and they are taken in by this other planet like as refugees. And it's really nice because it's like, it's about cooperation and coexisting. And there's this team and there's this slow burn romance and it's just found family, great teamwork dynamics, a really fun planet to explore. It's very like Star Trek vibes, I think also, if that makes sense. It's not quite episodic. Like I wouldn't say it's as episodic as A Long Way to a Small and Angry Planet, and it's way shorter. Like those are my complaints on that book, is like it's great, but it's really long and a little episodic for me. And this one's like a tight 300-page story that takes place over like a year on this planet, and I devoured it in like 2 days, and I bought this special UK hardback because I love it so much.
Beautiful.
Yeah. No, the US, this is another case where the US cover of this book is just trash. They whitewashed it like in so many ways, and it looks, I don't even know how you can tell what that book's about. This doesn't tell you either, but it at least is pretty.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a common issue for science fiction.
I think it's also an issue in particular for Karen Lord. Like, I don't know what's up with her US covers, but like the UK covers are vastly superior.
Well, and like, it doesn't make sense till you read the book why it's a hummingbird, but it does make sense that this is a hummingbird. On the US cover, it's just like some white person on the cover when the character is black. And on the back is this like other character who's the other like lead and doesn't look like him either. And it's just a white background that makes you think it's like a sci-fi dystopian maybe.
That is what the cover looks like, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't give you the vibe of this at all. And like this is like really great, optimistic, heartwarming, like exploratory sci-fi. You have like different pathways of humans. So like some humans have psychic powers now. It's like genetic divergence, but they're still all able to like interbreed. And there's different cultures that pop up, some that are more relatable to maybe older cultures and some that are just so new. And it's also an exercise in what if a government actually like wasn't super corrupt? What if it was just like only a little corrupt and things could actually function how we like hoped they did, which I also enjoyed. So,
which is a very interesting contrast to mine. So mine is The Stone Weta, and this is all about like extremely corrupt governments. Oh, come on, phone, don't turn off. So basically, The Stone Weta is a short, I think it's also pretty short, like maybe 250 pages, near future dystopian sci-fi, which is basically ecological sci-fi. So this is a mixture of nature writing and like real, I don't know what to call it, belief in science. So it follows a bunch of different scientists, women, who are all trying to form a secret network to keep real data about what's happening in the world, like all of the ecological stuff. And the governments are very much after them, trying to stop their network, trying to keep them from retaining this data. And it's kind of like an espionage thriller, but it's all of these scientists who are basically just trying to keep the real data. And they each have code names, which are after different animals and like plants and things like that. One of them is the stone weta. And it's very much a global South perspective. So the author of this is a New Zealand author, and like all of the different characters are from different places, like some where they were part of an island and that island is now submerged under the water and all of these sorts of things. And it's just so cool. I love the nature writing, and each of their kind of like personas, it'll have a little bit at the beginning of a chapter for them, and it'll talk about the like real science of that animal or plant, and then relate that to like what they're doing in the chapter, like their personality and everything. So it's very dystopian, and it's about governments being pretty awful, but it's also about resistance, and it's just so cool. I love this.
I love when epigraphs do that. I love that.
Yeah, I just added that to my Goodreads. That sounds really good.
It's so good. I really loved it.
Also, it's even shorter than you said. It's like a good novella length. It's at least Storygraph tells me it's 133 pages.
Yeah, you know what? So my issue was this was eligible for Hugo's, and I couldn't tell if I was supposed to nominate it in the novella or the novel category. And so there was like a big discussion in the community, and technically it's a novel, like it's just over the word count, but it's like real on the line.
Yeah, I don't actually know the word count. I usually base it like for myself, not an official thing, off like pages. I'm like, okay, if it's less than 200 pages, I'm calling it a novella, and that's
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but it's so cool. I loved it.
All right, and my pick is Ring Shout. So this one is a little bit of a genre bender because it's supernatural. So some people will say it's fantasy and some people will say it's science fiction. So it's got a little bit of a mix of both of those genres in it. And it follows our main character in, I believe, the 1920s or 1930s America. And she's fighting against what's called Ku Kluxes, which are basically demons that have infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan. And she and a couple of other people are the only people that can see them as demons versus as people. And it's just a really fast-paced, I'm going to call it a novella. We just had that discussion. Not sure if it technically is or not, but
it just won the Nebula for the novella category.
Okay.
There we go. That makes it official.
Officially novella. What I really liked about this one is in the best possible way, it feels like you're being dropped into a finale of a TV show. It's just so action-packed. It's everything coming together, but it's not so fast that you never feel like you know what's happening or like you're forced to try and piece together what's going on. It's done in a very careful way so that you understand who these characters are. You get to like them. They feel like real characters, but at the same time, it is also really fast-paced and it's very much focused on that action. Highly recommend. Only other thing I will say is if you're kind of averse to gore, maybe look this up a little bit before reading because it is pretty gory, but I like that. So that was not a problem for me.
I'm really sensitive to gore, but that was actually one of my favorite books last year. So it does, especially in the last part of it, get a little bit gory, but it draws you in so much into the story that I was totally okay with it. And I think also that this is one of those books where like some people might worry about the content being like super heavy, but that's not how it feels. It feels really powerful and epic and like so engaging.
Nice. Yeah, and it definitely has like deeper themes in it, but I wouldn't say that those are necessarily the primary focus of the story. They're just kind of a natural byproduct of the world that this is set in is you're going to have those deeper, darker themes, whereas really the main focus is the main character is just trying to survive and get through the end of the story.
Nice. It's on my list to get to. It's on my never-ending list, but I've been reading other P. Jelly Clark. I need to read A Master of Jinn because I've been reading that whole novella series.
I need to read that too.
I'm halfway through it, so she's reading it out loud to me and loving it.
Oh yeah, I'm so excited. Yeah. Like I was hearing from Mara and other people that like it kind of felt like connected novellas and they didn't love that. And I'm like, oh, but I like that like weird narrative thing, so I'm kind of excited.
Yeah, I haven't noticed that so far. For me, what I'm really liking is that, I mean, it's a steampunk thing, so I think it's a little bit sci-fi, but it is something where your main character is this really badass woman in 1912 Cairo, and she like wears suits, and she's part of this ministry and like really feminist, and it's constantly checking her because even though she's so progressive in some ways, she's not progressive in others, and it's like constantly. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
That was one of my favorite things in The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, so I'm very excited that's in here too. That's so cool.
Yeah. Okay. We only spent 10 minutes on that question. Awesome.
Well, Jade, you said you read 3 sci-fi. There has to be a favorite in there.
I mean, I can tell you my favorite of the 3. They were all 4 stars, so they were all kind of like really similar. So the 3 sci-fi books that I've read were, I read a YA like sci-fi thriller called my brain doesn't work these days. Okay? It's
something or other.
First book in the Thunderbird series. Well, okay, let me tell you the next one. I also read book 4 or 5. Oh my gosh. So for people who like don't know, like when you're pregnant, like your brain just, you forget things really easily. I thought it was kind of like a myth, but like so real for me. Like I can't remember anything.
Yeah, I know you had one in The Expanse, but I don't remember which number you read.
Yeah, that's 4 or 5, but I think it's 4. Okay, so I have my Goodreads pulled up, but it's sorted by pub date instead of date read. So I read one of the Expanse books, and then I just read an Octavia Butler. I read Parable of the Sower, which is like a dystopian, and I like I said, I gave them all 4 stars. The Expanse book that I read was Cibola Burn, so book 4, and I really liked it. That was a lot of fun. That was like a 4.5 that I rounded down. So I think that's my answer for the best sci-fi I've read this year. And then the YA thriller, sci-fi thriller was 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray, which was this really cool, like alternate universe murder mystery like thing. It's definitely a little bit of a product of its time because it came out in 2014. And the romance is a bit heavy, but I really like some of the settings of the alternate universes because like they were kind of like different genres. Like one was like set under the ocean because the world had flooded. One was like if the Russian Revolution, like it was set kind of like in the Russian Revolution, but it was like during present time. Like it was the feeling of the Russian Revolution. It was kind of like Anastasia-y. And then there was one that was like super futuristic. So I thought that was a lot of fun. But as far as like one that I enjoyed the most, I would say Cibola Burn. I did find Parable of the Sower interesting, but it's also very heavy. It was very heavy. So I want to continue with that one. But yeah, out of those 3 that I've read, my favorite was probably Cibola Burn. The Expanse series for me is just kind of like fun and like candy, you know, like it's a page turner and I really enjoy them. So
one day I'll pick it up. Maybe I'll just wait to see if people think it sticks the landing.
Well, you won't have to wait too much longer for that. So, okay. Next, let's talk about best sequel you've read so far. So if I was to answer this, the only sequel I've read was the Expanse book, but I did really enjoy it. So
mine is for sure A Desolation Called Peace by, I actually don't know how to say her name. I always say Arcady Martine, but I think I might be saying it wrong, her first name. But this is the sequel.
Oh, I've always heard it said, but I don't know.
I've heard it both 2 ways, and I haven't heard her say her own name. And but it's the sequel to a memory called Empire. So the second book in the text colon, Empire, it's a duology, but she has told us there might be novellas, and I'm like really itching for other character perspectives. And I really loved A Memory Called Empire, but it was only a 4-star because it had like some pacing issues for me at like the 70% mark, even though it's like objectively action packed. Like it's like an insane course of time that happens to that character. But A Desolation Called Peace kept all the thematic stuff that I love from the first book about like empire and what it means to like, I don't know, try to assimilate but never be a part of that people, and like power imbalances in a relationship. It does all of that still, but it adds a lot of the sci-fi tropes I love, like first contact with aliens, military sci-fi. There's still political intrigue. Like it adds just all of my sci-fi buzzwords to the plot portion of it all of a sudden, but keeping that thematic and lyrical richness in the writing style that was always there. And it gets more point of views. So the first book's only Mahit, and that's great. But this one, when we have like 3 Seagrass and other characters, it's just so good because the author does such a good job of being like, these are different cultures, and it even shapes how these people think differently. So you really know when you're in a different point of view because their worldview is so different. And I don't know, I really loved it. And I buddy read it with a friend. So that also like heightens my reading experience because we were just like, oh my goodness, what do we think's happening? Could it be this thing? Like we were, hypothesizing, and it was just so much fun. I do think I'll think of A Memory Called Empire more through time, even though it's a lower rated book for me, because I think this was more of just like more entertaining for me. But thematically, that first book was so good.
Yeah. I didn't know the second one had other POVs. That definitely makes me want to read it more.
Yeah, like it has two of the POVs you actually met in the first book, and it has a couple other ones. And it has one POV that's in the first person plural, which is very interesting.
Ooh, that's a weird one.
Yeah, it's a really interesting part, and also dives into language, which is always a big theme throughout the whole thing. It takes it like a different way.
That was one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Children of Ruin, the sequel to Children of Time, also has a third person plural point of view, by the way.
I saw that you read that recently.
Yeah.
The first one.
Also, it kind of verges into horror. Like it goes full-blown horror for a lot of it. So
Which is what I kind of expected from the first one, and it didn't happen. So.
Yeah, the first one didn't happen. The second one totally goes full-blown horror. So you might like that part of it.
Yeah. Were you grossed out too much by anything?
I was pretty grossed out, yeah.
Yeah.
I was pretty grossed out. I think a lot of the gross part, I mean, oh man, yeah. I think if it hadn't been the sequel, like if I hadn't already built up some trust with the author, I would have DNF'd it. But it was too gross for me, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the sequel to Children of Time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. It was good, but I would say also it hits like the same beats. Mm-hmm. So that does not make my favorite sequel of this year. Although it was good. It was like a 4-star read, but it didn't do anything like super new. Yeah. My best sequel is The Citadel of Weeping Pearls by Alieta Boudard. And this is less like a strict sequel so much as a companion novel. So she has this huge Shuya universe where she's got tons of novellas and short stories and all sorts of things. And so this is like a complete story in and of itself. So if you want to just read this one, you can. But this is my favorite of her Shuya universe stuff. It's a novella, and it is super, super cool. This Shuya universe that she has is the space opera type of universe that is based on like Vietnamese culture, but has tons of interesting tech. It has mind ships. It has like these kind of memory implants of your ancestors. So kind of like A Memory Called Empire with a memory implant, except that it's your ancestors giving you advice. So it's like very rooted in Vietnamese culture. And it has a big empire, and we're following a storyline where basically there is this entire kind of space station, the Citadel of Weeping Pearls, which disappeared like 20 years ago. And one of the Empress's daughters was the person who like was there and doing all sorts of really cutting edge science research and stuff. But she was at loggerheads with her mom. And rather than like have full blown war break out into the empire, the Citadel disappeared. But now the empire is under a lot of threat, and they want to find this Citadel because they had some technology that perhaps could help save them against the threat that is invading the empire. So they're trying to find that. And so it's all about the scientists who are trying to connect with that missing Citadel, some really cool, like kind of space time bending science. And just, it's very political, and also really focuses a lot on mother-daughter relationships, like complicated ones. And so I thought this was, if you want space opera, this is space opera. So I had such a fun time.
I'm excited. I need to check that out. What was the first one though? Like, I know you say they're companion, but you didn't read it? Okay.
There's like 30 books, 30 like stories and novellas in this. So I have no idea what the first one was. I've read The Tea Master and the Detective, and I've read On a Red Station Drifting. This is my favorite of those three. I will say that Alieta de Boudard is kind of like, you know how you talk about Nine Fox Gambit being one of those things where you're thrown into the world and you don't really know what's going on? Yeah, times like 10. So this is one of those things where if you want your world building spelled out, this is not going to be the series for you. But if you're fine with just being thrown into it and trying to kind of piece it together, which is kind of how I like a lot of my stories, it's really good, but definitely warning for that.
I think I found the first book, if you're curious. It's The Lost... what's the name of the world? How do you pronounce it? Shuyan Bride.
Interesting.
That's the first one. It was published in 2007.
I've never heard of that one.
All right, and this is easy because I don't have an answer for this one. I didn't read any science fiction sequels this year.
I feel like there are less sequels in sci-fi than fantasy. Not that there aren't huge sci-fi series, but it's not the sci-fi trilogy is not as common as the fantasy trilogy.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Definitely true.
Agreed.
All right, moving on. New release yet you haven't read but want to. You see, I can't even read normally. I flipped words, whatever. It made sense. I will actually answer this question, and the answer is Fugitive Telemetry. I actually got a physical arc of this, which was really cool. I've never been offered a physical arc from a publisher before. Like, I've gotten physical arcs at like book fairs and things like that, or like conventions and stuff. But they actually like got an email. It was like a mass email, like, hey, if you're interested in a physical copy of this, send us your address. And I didn't know if I was actually going to get it or not, but it came like a week before release. And I actually still haven't read the one before it. And I still haven't read one before it, but I have Network Effect, which is the novel that comes before it, out from the library right now. So it's like on my to-do list, like I want to read it. But for those of you who don't know, Fugitive Telemetry is the newest Murderbot novella. And I have really enjoyed the, 4 novellas that I've read so far. I might be off on my numbers. But
you don't need to read the novel, by the way. The novel takes place after the Fugitive Telemetry.
Ooh, maybe I'll read Fugitive Telemetry first then.
You should, actually. You should. That would be my preferred reading order.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people not complain, but be thrown that chronologically happened.
Yeah, because a lot of people are like, wait, why are we here?
Yeah.
Like, why are we here after the end of Network Effect? But it's actually before Network Effect. So
okay, well then I might get to read it sooner than I thought, which is very exciting. But yeah, I've really enjoyed the Murderbot series. They're just like, they're fun. I really like Murderbot as a character. So that came out like last month or the month before, and I need to read it.
This was hard for me because I do think I'm kind of like up to date on like my 2021 releases, but there are like 2. One is We Are Satellites. I can't remember the author's name.
Sarah Pitsker.
That one.
That's mine.
I've heard some good things about that one from some friends, and it struck me as like the soft sci-fi, maybe soft sci-fi. I'm really bad at knowing things about books I haven't actually read. Luckily, it hasn't like bit me in the butt too much about picking up a book that's just not for me. But also The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. Because I've been reading some of their works, and that one seemed kind of maybe sci-fi thriller. Like maybe like one of those quick palate cleanser sci-fis that I like to read. But I haven't picked it up, mainly because I'm also really curious about their backlist. Like I want to read, it's a fantasy, I think, Magic for Liars. And I want to read, they have this like hippo.
I want to read the hippo book. I haven't read any of their books either, but they've been on my radar.
Yeah, the only one I've read is Upright Women Wanted, which I didn't hate, but also didn't love. It was a novella that was an average or a slightly above average novella for me. It was perfectly fine, but I also don't like the West as like my setting, which it's like the American West future, kind of like Handmaid's Tale, but in the West and like a novella length. So, but I'm curious about that author in general, and the premise of The Echo Wife, what little I know, felt thrillery and cool.
Yeah, that was on one of my anticipated releases, I think. It sounded really interesting, but of course I don't remember exactly what it's about. I think there's either alternate universes or like time travel.
I think it's clone.
It might be clone. I think like it's clone.
It was like one of my buzzwords.
Yeah. I think it's that like basically a woman discovers that her husband has been cheating on her with like a clone of her.
Oh, yeah.
I think,
which makes sense with the title being The Echo.
Yeah.
Like that makes sense.
Yeah. And I've heard even from people who thought like Upright Women Wanted was okay, I've heard really good things about The Echo Wife. So, and then for me, Sarah Pinsker, We Are Satellites. So this I just got from the library, and I am very excited about it. I've only read Sarah Pinsker's like short stories before, but she does such great mystery. So I don't know if this is a mystery or not, but the premise is so very timely. Basically, this is in a world near future, it's a little bit dystopian, where everybody has like an implant that connects you to like technology and everything like that. And there's this family, it's queer, by the way, it's two wives. So one of them like gets the implant, and like I think one of their kids gets the implant or something like that. And it's about, I think, the wife who does not get the implant and who does not want to get to the implant, except that this is in like one of those almost Big Brother-y, like everybody is surveilled. And so it's very hard to resist that. And so it's all about trying to resist this invasion of your privacy by this completely pervasive technology. And I think it's very funny. My husband is very much against all of these apps and websites and everything that does all of this surveillance. So he's really, really picky, and it's super hard to disconnect from all of the surveillance that goes on in our life, and just constantly him being like, no, I can't install a weather app because all weather apps on your phone are tracking you and selling your data and all of these things. Like, it's actually really, really hard to disengage. So I think this is going to be a very cool exploration of that in a sci-fi.
I'm excited for you to read it before me so I can know what I'll feel. Because what I've learned about our reading, Shannon, is I like a lot of what you like. You don't like everything I like, but I can use the inverse to my advantage.
That's always nice.
And mine is a book that we already talked about, which is A Desolation Called Peace. I still haven't gotten around to it. I read the first book earlier this year, so I'm very much looking forward to reading the sequel.
So you really enjoyed A Memory Called Empire?
I enjoyed it. I don't know if I would go so far as to say really enjoyed. I had a little bit of mixed feelings about it because I typically don't like slower paced, focused on world building stories, which that one definitely is. However, despite that, I did still enjoy it. So it was kind of one of those where it's like, kind of have a natural resistance to this type of story. But it was done in a way that was interesting. And I think it helped that the main character is focused on soft sciences, liberal arts, whatever word you want to use, which is what I studied in college. So I had a little bit more palpability there and a slight relatability to the main character and some of what she went through. So
yeah, I had some mixed feelings about the first one. I read it last year. And I struggled with the politics. I just found them kind of like boring for some reason. And it was very slow, but I really enjoyed the memory piece. Like, that's like one of my bookish buzzwords. Yeah. So I loved that. And just from talking with Angela mostly, but it sounds like the stuff that happens in the second book is like more up my alley. Like you said, it's like more entertaining, and also like the stuff that was hinted in the first book as to what was coming about like first contact and things like that really excites me. So I'm still like on the fence about whether or not I'm going to read the Desolation Called Peace, but I think I'm going to give it a try because I think I would like it more than I liked the first one, but we'll see.
Yeah. And it's also, it could just be a case, since I do think like the authorial voice is very the same in both. So if there was just like, the way she chooses to like portray information just doesn't jive with you, you might find out just really early in A Desolation Called Peace that even though it's more action packed, it just doesn't work.
I do find the language stuff interesting, but I also didn't enjoy the poetry stuff. Like,
there is less poetry in the sequel.
Okay.
But there is still exploration of art and how that plays into resistance, and it's done in kind of a really cool way, but it's not poetry.
Yeah. I'm intrigued enough to one day read it. Okay. Next question. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and I have an answer for this. It is, I have notes because I know that my brain is broken. It is the last Expanse book. Hopefully,
that's mine as well.
I figured, I knew that you were a fan of the series. But there's not a lot of sci-fi specific books that I'm anticipating for the rest of the year. I've only, like I said, read the first 4. I have the 5th one out from the library, so that's like, because I wanted to get caught up before the last one comes out. I'm running out of time. That's not going to happen. How far into the series are you, Jenna?
I am fully caught up, so I am through book 8. So I'm very excited for book 9 to come out. It's a little bittersweet because I've been reading this series for so long. I mean, geez, I didn't read the first book when it came out, but I read it a couple years after it came out. So I mean, it's probably been at least 6 or 7 years for the whole series. So,
well, you can keep talking about it since you have like the same answer.
Yes. So Leviathan Falls. The first book is Leviathan Wakes. The last one is Leviathan Falls.
Yeah.
Whoa. It's just what's really interesting about this series is you've been with these characters for so long in their lifetime as well. Because it's 9 books, it's sort of split into, not clearly split into, but pseudo split into 3 sorts of trilogies. So like the first 3 books are them early on when they're like in their mid to late 20s. And then the next 3 are them in their like 30s. And then the final 3, they're like in their 60s or 70s. So you really have gone on this journey with all of these characters. So I'm going to be highly emotional when that final book comes out. It's an excellent series. I'm sure everyone who clicked on this video that has sci-fi in the title has probably at least heard of The Expanse because it's all over the place. But in case you haven't, it's a space opera story that follows a group of core characters, but then each book has some different POVs thrown in. And it deals very heavily with first contact and this mysterious, unknowable alien force that is infiltrating our main characters' lives.
And they're very like actiony. Like that's why there is a TV show, which is a little bit different in some respects, but definitely heavily inspired. And it's just, it makes for a good TV show because like I feel like each book is fairly episodic. Like they, have a pretty solid like story arc. Mm-hmm. Granted, I've only read 4, but they're like all about different things, like different things that happen to the characters. But yeah, they're just like fun for me. Like usually when I start one, I have a hard time putting it down because there's just like so much happening that I'm just like, oh, what's going to happen next? And there's like different things that I enjoy about each one. I do also like that there are like minor characters. Like Jenna was saying, there's, the main characters, and then you get different POVs in each book. And then some of them recur like later. Mm-hmm. And I was reading the 4th one and I happened to start the TV show while I was reading the 4th one. And I realized one of the POVs in the 4th book was actually in the 1st book. And I like didn't put that together until I saw him in the show. So things like that are kind of fun. Yeah,
it definitely reminds me a lot of sci-fi TV shows, Star Trek, more like the newer Star Treks because it's more action oriented, Battlestar Galactica, any of those, and also Mass Effect, the video game series, of which I am a massive fan. So that was kind of natural that they're very, very similar tonally. Just as a little plug out there, in case anyone's read The Expanse and you have not played Mass Effect, you should go play Mass Effect because you would really like it.
No, it's just Mass Effect.
It's a series I've been wanting to read, and I was at the bookstore yesterday, and I was annoyed because, they did that thing with the books where the spines changed. So if you collected all of them, they changed the spines, and, like, not that I was expecting to ever own all 9 books for my shelves, because that's, like, a very large amount of books for my tiny 2-bookshelf system. But if I wanted to, I would be so perturbed, because I'm a very aesthetically driven book collector, and I'm like, if you're going to have their names be big, it should be all of the books, not just the last set.
Yeah.
So it bothered me. But I'm also maybe going to try it as like my next big audio series one of these days.
I enjoy the audiobooks. I've mostly like listened to them. And actually something that I only recently learned within the last like 3 months is it's actually an author duo, right, Jenna?
Yes. Yeah, they're writing under a pseudonym.
Yeah, Alan on the Worldhoppers loves one of the author's works, the Long Price Quartet. Or something, Long Prince Quartet. I don't know. It has... Regardless, one of the author duos wrote that and has a new fantasy release coming out. Not that that's relevant to this sci-fi thing, but that's a thing that's happening. Gross. Mine, this was really hard because I actually think a lot of the new sci-fi releases aren't talked about yet because we're not quite at like July. Because I was trying to look at all my favorite publishers and there weren't too many, and well, too many out from like now. But then I keep forgetting that there is the third Skyward book coming out.
Oh yeah,
Cytonic's coming out.
That too.
Now, it's not like this whole series is only a 4-star series for me, despite my love of the Cosmere. But I still like it. And what's kind of sucks is the third book's not the last book. I think I'd be more excited if it was the finale. This is the third in a quartet. But we did leave off on quite the cliffhanger in Starsight. So it would be nice to see what's happening next. Because I'm also concerned about one of our characters. We were left in a lurch. So I think that's the one. I mean, kind of near future, there's one called Gear Breakers, which people have told me is like sapphic Pacific Rim, and Pacific Rim's like my favorite action movie comfort movie thing. And so it's a young adult, and I asked for an arc, but I didn't get it. So I need to wait for it to come out. But that comes out in like a week or 2 weeks. It's like super soon. The cover is really cool. So those are like the two, but I assume there's going to be more, but just like none of the blogs are talking about that. I can't find it. Also, shout out to everyone who makes blogs, because I don't know how the internet exists without you in terms of searching for bookish information, because I don't know how you compile this information.
For me, I am looking forward to The Last Cuentista by Donna Barbara Higuera. So this is an author who has one other book out that I've heard about, that I've read, called Lupe Wong Won't Dance, which is a middle grade contemporary. And I read it and I really, really enjoyed it. And then I just heard about this, which is, I don't know if it's middle grade or YA, but it is a generation ship sci-fi, where basically Earth is collapsing and a small group of humans, so like basically scientists and their families, get to be on a generational ship and leave Earth. Most of the people are left behind. But something goes wrong with the sleep pods. So this is like a 400-year journey. Something goes wrong. And everybody loses.
I love that premise. Like,
right?
anytime there's a generation
Right?
and something goes wrong,
Yeah.
I love that.
So everybody loses all of their memories except for this girl. So she's the last storyteller. She's the last one with memories of Earth, with memories of their stories. And so it's supposed to be like all about the power of storytelling and the power of connection. And I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like, I trust this author because I loved what she did with Lupe Wong Won't Dance. And then the premise sounds so cool. So yeah, I'm really excited about this.
And this is also middle grade.
It is middle grade? Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure if it was going to be middle grade or YA.
That's what Goodreads says. So
that's what Storygraph also says. But
okay. Well, and her previous book was middle grade, which makes me even more excited because you guys know I love middle grade SFF so much. I think that middle grade is one of those things where it tackles all of the hard issues, but in a way that is just full of heart and like so consumable. Stop turning off. And so, yeah, I'm like, okay, that makes me really, really, really excited about this.
Granted, it's not straight from the mouth of the publisher, but that's what the internet says.
If it was young adult, I'd assume it's very young reading young adult based off that.
So too. Yeah, the main character is 12 years old, so that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like it'll be middle grade, but yeah, I love middle grade SFF.
I need to read like Sal and Gabby Break the Universe. That's like a sci-fi middle grade. That's like, I need to consume it. Yes, I need that. Yes.
Okay, so Jenna's answer was the same as mine. We already talked about it. Awesome.
We had the obligatory Expanse talk. Our video is now okay for 2021.
I mean, I figured that Jenna might use that answer, but it's the only one that I'm really looking for.
It was inevitable that if I'm invited onto a video talking about science fiction, that I will force the Expanse in here at some point. Yeah. So we got that out of the way now.
I mean, I just think they're so fun, and I'm always surprised when I come across people who don't like it, which obviously is totally fine. It's not, nothing's for everyone. But I'm just like, what? They're just like page turners, and they're just so fun. Like,
yes. I haven't picked it up yet because I'm a little worried I won't like it.
I think Shannon might DNF it based off an assumption I have, but I haven't read it myself, so I could read it and then tell Shannon if she could.
I think the thing is, like, I have seen like at least part of the first season of the TV show, and it feels like there could be some body horror, which I hate. And then I really hate things that are fast paced. And I hate twists and turns. And so like
Okay,
this is why I'm like, I'm not so sure. Like you guys are like, oh, Man I Called Empire was a little slow. I'm like, oh, that's the pace I love.
Yeah.
That like just super contemplative. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. I kind of want to try it, but
I don't think he would like it. So
I was also just thinking authorial voice, because isn't the first one kind of like a mystery and potentially noirish? Because that's something Shannon does not like.
Yes.
I love mysteries, but I don't like the kind of super male-centric noir. Like that kind of thing just gets on my nerves. But I love mysteries. So it's just, yeah. So there's a lot of things about it where I'm like, I don't know, guys.
I would say the first book is like that. Like, to be fair, I think the first book is the most different from the rest of them, because that one is more of a body horror noir-ish, and it like very much does that. Like one of the POV characters is the like grizzly middle-aged detective dude, and there's like no women basically in that book, but it gets better as it goes on. I think they were kind of experimenting a little bit, and then as the series goes on, it goes more in a science fiction space opera direction.
Can you skip the first book?
Probably not. I mean, you could maybe watch the first season.
Yeah, I was gonna say watch the first season of the show, and
yeah,
then,
I've seen at least most of that. So
yeah.
I mean,
or read the Wikipedia entry.
Or is it like 1.5 seasons of the show? I don't know. I feel like they don't line up exactly, so you'd have to look into that. But I think the first season or whatever that covers the first book pretty well. So that's definitely a possibility.
Worst case, if you start reading the second or third and you're like, I'm definitely missing a plot point, you can just ask them.
Yeah, that's true. There's always us in the internet. But is it the second book? I think it's the second book that has like 2 of my favorite women characters. Maybe it's the third one. No, I think it's the second one, right?
I think it is the second one. If you're thinking Bobby and oh my god, I cannot remember her name, but the politician. Yeah.
Well, the politician was in the series, and I loved her. She
doesn't show up in the books till the second one, but I love her. And then there's also another character named Bobby, who I love as well. And in the fourth one, they were like, we got a little bit of POVs from the 2 of them in the prologue, and I was like, sweet, they're gonna be in this book. And like they weren't in the book. It was just the prologue and the epilogue that we saw from their POVs. But yeah, they're pretty cool women characters, so it does get a little bit better, but the first one has a lot of things that you wouldn't like. Okay, let's talk about biggest disappointments.
All right, mine for me is The Stars Are Legion by Cameron Hurley. So I read The Light Brigade 2 years ago, and I really like it. I mean, it was a book that I thought was just going to be like an action-packed sci-fi, which it was. I read it in like 3 days. I finished it. And I'm like, okay, I'll probably never think about this book again, because it felt like it was one of those one-off entertainment experiences. But 2.5 years later, I still think about it. I kind of want to reconsume it. I think of it as like a Christopher Nolan sci-fi film, as like a book, where like it would be enhanced on rereads, and it really is just like this one concept. It's not that deep, but it kind of pretends to be deep. It's that like feel of a book, if that makes sense. And no hate to Christopher Nolan films. Like I do like them for what they are. I just don't think they're the deepest things in the universe. Right. And so The Stars Are Legion was the book she wrote 2 years before that, and I was always interested in it, and I found out it was a standalone, and I picked it up, and it has amnesia in a main character, which is one of my sci-fi buzzwords. I love character amnesia, and it has like one of the weirdest world building things ever, which is also one of my things, right? Being thrown into a world I don't know anything about, and it's super weird. Like I love Nine Fox Gambit, like those things, and it just fell flat. It was like a 3-star read. None of the characters were things I latched onto. The world is really cool, but never really explained, and because I didn't care about the characters, I like didn't care about the world, and I didn't understand their like plan to fix their situation. And it was a book where like you didn't know what was happening for a long time, and then the theme showed up, and the theme showed up really loud. Like the theme was like, look at me, I am here. And I'm like, I get it, and I don't disagree with you, but I also don't know if I agree with your portrayal of this theme. Like I'm confused, and why is this so loud? Like this is obnoxious. Like it was tonally off for me. I still want to check out, she has a fantasy trilogy, because I really did like The Light Brigade, but maybe that's just one of those, this author's not a favorite, but I liked this like work sort of thing. So that's my disappointment, just because I was excited, and it was kind of like a fast-paced slog. I don't know how to describe that. Like it was was action-packed, and it should have been really interesting, but didn't work for me. And a lot of my friends, because we were buddy reading it in a group, and I was one of the few people who finished it, because as Shannon knows, I just keep going unless it really bothers me.
I'm pretty sure that my husband also did not like that one. So
Nice.
I think he might have even DNF'd it. Like, he really liked the Light Brigade and then not that one. So I think that might just be...
It also has an absurd amount of body horror. Like, not absurd, but it's like, it's not what you think the book's about. And it's like, it's cool because it's a world that's not metallic. It's in space, and there's travel in space, and there's a lot of technology, but none of it's metal made. It's all organic. Every technology is based off organic material. So that in itself is really cool, but also means there's a lot of like fluids and like squishy things. And like, I'm glad I'm not a visual reader. And it was just like, also became a quest story in the middle, which like, I'm not a quest story person. It did have cool found family, and that was the only thing saving it for me in the middle, is like they acquired a team while traveling. Like, and it also tonally reminded me of Metro 2033, even though it's very different, but like when you follow this character who's like, doesn't know this really apocalyptic world and has to travel through it. Because that's that book. I think it's 2033. It might be 34. I've only read the first book in that Metro series. I've not played the video game, and I never will because it will scare me. But yeah. So I don't know. I was just so excited. It had all my buzzwords, and it didn't work.
I had another like real big disappointment this year,
Oh, man.
which was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Oh, look, we can see ourselves. Anyway, this is very shiny. Sorry, I'll try to hold it at a different angle. Basically, Kazuo Ishiguro is more of like a literary fiction writer, but he has a couple of books, this being the second one, which are like near future sci-fis. So his first one, Never Let Me Go, is one that I really, really enjoyed. And I have read some of his other literary fiction ones and thought they were fantastic. And so excited about this. And then I picked it up and I was loving the first half. And then it just took a nosedive. I hated the ending of this so much. Like, I was so angry. I was just so angry. Soch and I were actually reading this out loud to each other, and we had to stop because I was so angry that I just couldn't get through it. And I had to just read it silently because I was like, is this going to just end this way? This is what it's going to be.
Did
yeah,
Soch
like,
too?
I'm sorry?
Did Soch hate the ending too?
Yeah, we both hated it. It was such a disappointment because, like, on my recommendation, he'd read those other books and loved them right before reading this, and then picked this up, and we were so excited in the beginning, and we were so into it, and then just, really, really did not like it. However, I will say, lots of other people are loving this, so that's not necessarily, like, everybody's opinion on it, but, yeah, I did not like it. Basically, this is a story of an android girl who is an artificial friend. So she gets sold to a family to be a companion to another little girl who has like a kind of like a chronic illness type of thing. And everything is told from the perspective of the android Clara, as she is trying to understand this world around her. The things that really bothered me about this is that the way that the mystery of the world is unraveled, it only unravels part way. So you get to the end of the book, and there's so much about this world that doesn't make sense. And not doesn't make sense in that it's complicated or not spelled out for you, but doesn't make sense in like it just literally doesn't make sense. Like you're like, wait, what is that? What is going on? And the parts that are explained are like almost like what you were saying about the Cameron Hurley thing. It's kind of hitting you over the head with some of the themes. And it's just like, okay, I guess. It also has kind of like magical realism almost to it. And like almost a Deus Ex Machina type of ending that I really disliked. And it does this overly like emotional thing where the second half of the book, basically every single human in this book is the worst ever. They're all super toxic to each other. Totally awful people. And then there's just all of this drama and emotional angst and stuff like that, which I really don't like. So it was just one of those things where I was so looking forward to this. And then it did kind of everything I dislike in the ending. So I was just really, really disappointed.
Kind of confirms to me that I shouldn't pick it up because I liked Never Let Me Go. I just read it like last month. But like you were saying, like as a literary fiction, I enjoyed it, but like, as a sci-fi, and I'm not going to spoil it. I know everyone's like, go in blind. And I'm like, okay, if you're a sci-fi reader, this is not going to blow your mind. Never Let Me Go does not blow your mind if you read sci-fi. That's not what happens. Maybe it blows your mind if you read literary fiction. That's fair. But if you read sci-fi, the sci-fi element is whatever. And it honestly is world building like weird, because I get to the end and I'm like, I feel like I don't know enough about this world to understand how we got here and why we are accepting it. Like, I don't understand.
And I mean, that's kind of his writing style, but in Never Let Me Go, there's at least something where you understand what the point of the story is, and it kind of makes enough sense. This one, I just felt like it dropped so that's what I was expecting. So I was like, okay, we're going to get to the point, right? We're going to like make sense of things, and then it just never did. If you want to read something else by him, read Remains of the Day. That's great.
I need to read that one, yeah.
That one's worth reading. So anyway, sorry.
All right, my pick for this is Whole Metal Girls by Emily Skrutsky. So I was looking up a pronunciation guide for the author. This was billed as inspired by Pacific Rim, which is also a movie that I very much enjoy. So that is the primary reason why I picked it up. It's about follows two main characters, but in the universe that it takes place in, there's these cyborgs basically. So if you're extremely poor and you need to provide for your family, you can go into this program and become a cyborg. But it sucks. Your whole body gets altered, and then you end up on these little 4-person pod teams, which is where the Pacific Rim elements come in, because they're all like mind linked to each other. So it did sound interesting, but it just did not work for me on basically every level that a book can not work. Did not like the pacing, did not like the world building, did not like the characters, didn't really like the writing either. It's tricky with science fiction because they're always going to be referential, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't necessarily mind if I read a book and I can immediately pinpoint, okay, this was inspired by this, like this was clearly taken from Star Trek, or this was taken from Pacific Rim, or wherever it comes from. But it becomes a problem when there's nothing else of interest in the book, so that every single element is like, okay, so you got this from this plot elements from that. And it was one of those kinds of books.
So a little too derivative.
Yeah, the world building just felt like it was a bunch of different stories stitched together. And then once you could recognize which stories it was, I was able to tell exactly where the story was going to go the whole time, which also isn't necessarily a problem. But when books do that, then I like to have characters that I really enjoy. And I just didn't really think the characters were well done in this. And then there's a couple scenes that were just a little odd. Notably, there were 2 scenes where queer characters were outed, and it was just kind of done, and then the story moved on, like it was never really acknowledged. And it was strange enough to have that happen once, but to have it happen twice in the story was just really unnecessary and distracting. And it was like, I'm already on thin ice with this, and then those happened, and like, yeah, I don't know why I finished it, other than it's really short, so it's really easy to burn through. The tone was also weird too, because the author has described it as being also like Space Jam, which I do not see at all, but that's how the author has described it. And then her dedication page, she dedicated the book to Kung Fu Panda 2. So when I saw that and then I read the book, I was expecting something with like a much like lighter tone to it. This book actually is. So that's a little bit of a weird like mismatch as well. But I do respect wholeheartedly dedicating your book to Kung Fu Panda 2. I understand that urge. Great movie. But this is not similar to that at all either. So I don't know. I guess if this is like your first foray into science fiction and you're also comfortable with body horror, which because it has that in it as well, you might enjoy it more. But I've just read so much fiction. Because early on, I will say, they get turned into cyborgs, and that is very detailed in the book. That experience, which is a very heavy duty medical procedure. So it is pretty gory in that aspect.
So it sounds like everybody should pick it up.
Yes.
That's a weird
Perfect
one.
book for everyone.
Okay, next question. Favorite new author, could be new to you or debut.
I thought the next one was Surprise, but okay.
Yeah, that's what.
Did I miss one? I might have missed one when I typed them up. Hold on.
Okay.
We'll do a surprise.
Okay.
How do I create banner?
Well, I can just say I have my main one is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. Not that I was expecting not to like this; it was on my radar, but I'd heard so many mixed reviews. I'd had friends who gave it 3 stars or were disappointed. I had friends who loved it, so I didn't really know where I'd land on it. And I think what surprised me is that it starts off fast-paced, kind of turns into medium-paced, and because of the authorial voice, I just devoured it by the end, if that makes sense. And I was really just connecting with these characters more than I expected when I started at the beginning, especially since it's first-person point of view, which for some reason, sometimes first-person point of view is really hard for me to connect with a character. I don't know why. But this is also, I was surprised by how beautiful in person this cover looks. I feel like cameras don't do this cover justice, but the spine is just so pretty and almost rainbow in real life. It's so good. But this is one of these multi-dimensional traveling books where you can go to another dimension if you're not alive on that dimension. And it definitely thematically talks about social inequality, because a character who is poor in many worlds is more likely to be dead and more likely to be able to travel. And it's about taking advantage of that labor and using it to travel and acquire information. And although there are some parts of the theme that I think are a little obvious, I guess, I don't know how to say it. There was so much in here that I didn't expect to be in here and I thought handled really well and nuanced. And this is a debut. So I'm always really impressed when debut authors can handle thematic work and character work really well and thematically, and just, I don't know. I was just surprised by it. So I'm excited for more works by this author. And I think they were teasing on Twitter that more things are coming soon. So I was very excited.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that one.
I have too. Kristen at Kristen L SFF Reader, that was her favorite sci-fi book from last year. So I think
you might really like it. It doesn't have, well, gosh. So I need to start mentally keeping track of how much body horror exists in my book for you specifically. Because it's not something I clock because I don't visually read. And there is violence, but I don't remember how gory the violence is.
Yeah, I pinged Angela last week being I just got to this part in this book and there was this violent scene. Is there more violence? I don't know if I want to keep going. And she's I don't remember.
I had to ping other people, and then someone jogged my memory. It's oh yeah, Shannon, put it down. Put it down.
Okay, for me, my biggest surprise was Remote Control by Nydia Okorafor. So I had this on my radar, but I wasn't actually that excited about it for some reason. I had really loved the first 2 books in the Binti trilogy, and I had not liked the third. The third, yeah. I almost DNF'd, which, I mean, you know my taste, that there's a reason why it's very fast paced and things.
You're not alone. A lot of people don't like that third book.
Yeah, it's just So I wasn't sure about this one, but I had requested it from my library and it came in, and so I picked it up, and I actually loved it. It is very, very slow paced. So if you don't like slow paced, this is probably not the book for you. It also is not something. It's more episodic, so it's not one cohesive narrative in terms of one storyline. But what it is it's this exploration of a little girl who finds kind of a seed from space. And that seed changes her and gives her this power of death. And so what happens is she can cause mass death of everybody around her or of specific people. And this makes her a total social pariah. And so she is wandering the land. And it's set in Ghana, I think. I think it's in Ghana.
I think you're
kind
right.
Of a near future Ghana. There's definitely kind of pervasive technology and robots and a lot of surveillance and these sorts of things in this world. And she's wandering, and she also kills technology. So any technology around her dies as well. So she's very much a pariah, but also she becomes this almost mythical creature to everybody around her. And so they all know her and they all fear her, but also worship her. And so it's about that isolation, and it's about her trying to find purpose and meaning and connection. And so it was just this really slow, really beautiful story. I loved the writing, and I don't know, it just moved my heart so much. And so I kind of wasn't expecting that, and I really loved it.
No, I think that's my favorite work by Nydia Korfor. I've now read 5 of her books so far, and like that one's authorial voice. It's like a folk tale, but it's a sci-fi folk tale, which like
exactly.
that's my thing. So
yeah, it was really beautiful.
But I would say, like, if you are a sci-fi reader who needs harder sci-fi, like I know Rachel from Shades of Orange didn't like Remote Control because it didn't feel sci-fi enough in like the way that they grab for the genre.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's kind of genre bending without being exactly genre bending, but it's like that science. It's got all the tech, but then the kind of power that she gets is one of those so far future that it becomes magic again type of feels.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those, here's your superhero, but is the superhero based off a sci-fi origin story or a fantasy? And then once you have the powers, it's all magic. And
exactly.
All right, for this one, I chose to go with surprises, as in didn't know where the story was going to go. So, and ironically, I also have a Nydia Korfor authored work to talk about. So this is a comic, but it's the Shuri series, written by Nydia Korfor, which is based on the character in Black Panther, the sister character. And this goes in such weird directions. It's not a positive or a negative. It's just not at all what I expected, especially from a superhero comic, because it starts with Shuri trying to find Black Panther because he's gone missing. And then it ends with a giant space bug that eats music. So I'm not entirely sure how we got from here to there, but it was a very interesting ride.
Nydia Korfor does that. She gives me plot whiplash like it's her job. Like most of her books that are plot based that aren't Remote Control, I'm like, how am I here? When did this happen?
It's a very interesting choice to have her do a superhero comic. Like I think this was a couple years ago that it was started in single issues, and I remember when it was announced, I'm like, okay, let's see how this is going to go, especially because writing for comics is very different than writing a standard novel, so it can be tricky for some authors to make that jump. And Nydia Korfor is definitely an author where her individual writing style is like so much of the story that it was interesting to see when that was kind of taken away, because obviously she has control over where the story goes, but if it's relayed in visual format versus being written out, it's going to be a different experience. But definitely a surprising, twisting, turning series that if you're interested in that character, and if you're not really interested in superhero stories, but you still like that character, this might hit that sweet spot for you, because it just is so unlike normal superhero stories. But by that same token, it can be kind of divisive, because if that's what you're expecting going in. But that was definitely the biggest surprise. And like, I don't know how we got to this giant music eating space beast, but it was very interesting, a journey there.
Very intrigued by the idea of eating music.
I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Her imagination is my favorite thing.
Yeah.
I have read a short story by, what's her name? 9 Bar Blues, Renee, oh shoot, I forget her name. But the short story collection 9 Bar Blues had aliens who consumed music. Not like a bug or anything. They were like more like alien beings. But I mean, 9 Bar Blues is like referring to, I think, jazz, something like that.
Sounds reasonable.
Cherie Renee Thomas, something like that. She's like a really cool Black sci-fi author. It was like way over my head. It was a little too literary, but yeah, eating music, not the first time.
Interesting. Okay, now we'll do favorite new author.
I just like surprises. Let's see.
No, I like surprises too. I typed the list of questions up while drinking coffee this morning, and I just missed it.
Mine are technically like, I'm gonna like list two with the caveat that like I read their first works in the past, but they weren't like favorite authors yet till this year when I read second works, and that's Karen Lord and Octavia Butler. And I already talked about The Best of All Possible Worlds, which I adore, and Karen Lord just has an authorial voice that like makes me laugh, makes me feel. I love her works so far. I've read two, but like it's one of those, I found an author who I'll read their works because I like how they form sentences, you know, like that sort of connection. And it's similar with Octavia Butler because I'm reading the Patternist series right now, which is Wild Seed. And it's the weird series that's published out of order, but they release it in order chronologically. It's weird. I don't know yet if I prefer doing it the way that they publish it or if I would have preferred doing it in publication order. I haven't committed yet. It also has a book that's out of print that Octavia Butler doesn't like. It's a very weird series that fascinates me. And it's very simple. She writes in a very distilled down form of writing that I think doesn't work for some people. Like some people I think it's too simple, but I think it's purposefully minimalistic and I really like that. But her minimalistic take kind of happens with character work and themes too. Like she will introduce themes and characters, but I think puts a lot of trust in the reader to bring those things to life and to think about those things. And I've just been liking I like how she forms sentences. I read Kindred now. I've read Wild Seed. I'm finishing Mind of My Mind this afternoon after we're done chatting about stuff. And like, I can't put my finger on it. So it has to be the writing where I'm really liking this author and how they portray ideas on the page. Like nothing's ever been like a 5-star experience, but they've always been like really compelling experiences and like they fly by. And I'm like, it's like classic sci-fi, but because nobody talks about her in classic sci-fi. They talk about her as in sci-fi, but like she was writing in the 70s, like same as Ursula K. Le Guin. She needs to be in the same sentences. And it's like similar where it's like classic sci-fi is distilled and simple. Like that's what the style was. And I don't know, I like it.
Yeah, it's funny. I've read 2 Octavia Butlers, one last year, one recently. I've read Fledgling and Parable of a Sower. And I agree with the writing style. And it is very simple. And I think that while I don't hate that, it definitely impeded like my connection with the characters. Yeah. And I do like the ideas that she explores. But the 2 books that I have read by her have also been very heavy, like especially Parable of a Sower. There's a lot of islands and things that were hard to read. But she explores some really interesting ideas. So like I'm still compelled to keep reading her books. I especially want to try Kindred. I
think you would love Kindred. Like I think if there's a 5-star book for you in her collection, I think it would be Kindred.
I think so too. So both of the books that I've read by her, I've given 4 stars, and I don't think she's like a potential favorite author, but I like her enough that I want to like keep reading her stuff. So I want to read the ones that you talked about for sure.
I really like Butler, but I have to space out her works because they are intense. And like she brings up all of these questions, she doesn't solve them, and they're very difficult questions, and it's very difficult content. I read also her Xenogenesis series. That is also living spaceships and lots of kind of body horror, and also like the weirdest sex stuff. So like really
both of the books that I read had this weird like age gap sex thing.
Yeah, this is weirder. And like lots of issues of what consent means. And it's just, I mean, but she brings up such fascinating questions, but I'm like, man, I've got to pace myself because this is intense. But she is like a real influential classic author. I also agree. She should be in that same category.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, it's more of like a new favorite classic sci-fi author, probably. Yeah. It's like in that vein where it's because classic sci-fi is more about the ideas, right? Like that's what the genre was doing.
Yeah. For me, I've got, I don't know which side's less shiny. They're really very reflective. So for me, I would say Vandana Singh. So this is a short story collection called Ambiguity Machines. And I read that a couple months ago and I really loved this. So Vandana Singh is a physicist and she has written some short stories that are really I would say kind of on the literary side of science fiction, where they're a little hard sometimes to fully parse, but they are so fascinating. She explores in these short stories all of these ideas of like kind of different timelines and different worlds and different possibilities and different cultures. And she does a ton with language and with history. And a lot of these stories are also based on like Indian classic epics and things like that. And they're filled with, they're almost like that classic sci-fi idea of exploration of ideas. And so it's constantly looking at, okay, so if we had this sort of ability to move between worlds or move between time or connect with our past selves or these sorts of things, what would it look like? And it's filled with that wonder that I think some of the classic sci-fi has, but it's also very, very rooted in culture and language and identity. A lot of these stories explore identity, and there's a lot of poetry as well. So if you're not into poetry, like the writing style in this might be hard. It's very poetic, very flowery, very literary in a lot of ways, but I like that, right? So I'm like, I like poetry and I like flowery language, and I like some things where you're asked to think about stuff, but not necessarily told what's happening. So I wouldn't say if you're looking for plot, she's not going to be like the right author for you. But if you're looking for beautiful language and exploration of ideas and integration of science as well as like poetry and culture and history, like I think that this was just really outstanding. So I definitely want to read more by her.
Yeah, you were telling me about that collection when we were reading something else, and now I'm still really intrigued just because I do love when scientists do delve into sci-fi, because I like to see where they choose to put in the fiction. You know,
I would be so fascinated to see if this works for you, because I think that there's some things about it that aren't so much your style, but then again, like the physics, I think, and then like the questions, it could really work.
I do honestly, literary sci-fi is where I don't mind my literary fiction to like hop in. So like we'll see. It could go well, and it could just be too abstract, and I'll just have to be like, well, you're smarter than me. It's okay.
I didn't understand most of what happened, so I think that's not true.
No, I meant more the author. Well, you also might be. I don't know. Comparing intelligence is a thankless task, but.
All right. My pick for this is an author that I have actually read before, but this is the first year that I've really like started to dig into their stuff, which is N.K. Jemisin. Yes, I absolutely really, really like her stuff. She tends to have more, at least in what I've read, she tends to have more of a focus on characters and character emotions, which is like absolutely my number one thing in reading. So I have enjoyed a lot of what I've read from her. Prior to this year, I'd only read one thing from her, and then now I'm making my way through her broader catalog. So new to me author, but not new.
A great choice. Fantastic. 10 out of 10.
I need to read more N.K. Jemisin. I've only read her short story collection, but I'm hoping to read more of her stuff this year. She's a favorite of a lot of people. So I think maybe the next few questions might go pretty quickly.
I mean, we can all vote to skip this one if we want. I have
no
answers.
answer.
I mean, I more decided to make this my favorite like couple in a book, because I just think like when I care about crushing, I'm more caring about like a romance. And so The Best of All Possible Worlds is my favorite, but I already talked about it. So I guess I'll bring up Winter's Orbit, which is a good crossover if you are new to sci-fi. But
I'm hearing good things about that one.
I mean, what I will say is if you are a sci-fi reader, the sci-fi plot portion to me is not very strong. And honestly, I would have preferred it to have taken more of a backseat and have been more of a romance sci-fi. Like, I think that's what I was more preferring, because these two characters are so cute and so awesome together. And I loved watching them get to know each other and be disasters together. I don't know. They were a really fun couple to follow. So that was my interpretation of this prompt, because I am 28 and
Yeah, I don't have any.
Yeah, well, I'm fully willing to be thirsty, so I do have one.
another P. Jelly Clark I need to read.
Yes,
Yeah.
Captain Anne Marie from the Black God's Drums. She's a minor character in here, but she's just a pirate captain, which is a huge buzzword. And she's one of those characters that has a tough exterior, but a little bit of a soft interior, which is absolutely what I like. And she is kind of a girl boss. She's got her pirate gang that she's running. We love to see that. So definitely Captain Anne-Marie.
Nice. Okay. New favorite character.
I'm so bad at this. Like, I'm like literally the worst. I'm just saying the best of all possible worlds for everything because by definition, like for me to love a book, I have to like really hyper love a character. But I'm forgetting her name. Her name is Grace. And she's a scientist. And so I love that. She's actually written in first person and her inner monologue is hysterical to me, which is so hit or miss. I've had many authors write an inner monologue where I'm like, you're being too cute. I don't appreciate this. But hers, like, I was just like, I love being in your head. Your head's great. I can hang out here all day, which is, I don't know, not super common. And I guess a runner-up would be Clara from The Space Between Worlds. And that was part of the surprises at first. I'm like, oh, I know you, Clara. I've seen your character before. You're nice to follow. But she really became a very unique character to me and how she developed and how she, like, handled her surroundings and grew. And I can't talk about a lot of what makes her character grow because it would be very spoilery. But, like, just her journey became such a focus of this story in a way I wasn't prepared for because I was expecting a more plot-driven narrative. And it is that, but it was a good mix of both, which is the perfect book, honestly. But, yeah.
I don't have one. I have like plenty of favorite characters from sci-fi that I've read earlier, but not this year. And I have plenty of like non-sci-fi favorite characters, but none of the sci-fi that I read this year really like grabbed my heart in terms of the characters. So
I really liked 12 Azalea from Memory Called Empire. He's definitely a side character in that story, but he's just so charming. And a lot of that story is more serious because it is very like life or death. And I wouldn't call him a complete comedic relief character because he's not fully goofy and funny, but he does crack jokes in the background. And he just seems like a good buddy. He's someone you'd want to be friends with. So I really enjoyed him.
He's really deceptively the heart of that book. Like he really is.
Yeah.
He really brings a lot of humanity to that book, I feel. Like in the chaos of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I did like him as a character. Mm-hmm. Okay, did any books make you cry? Angela's not a crier.
I gotta pass. I don't cry. I even tried to think if one like made me sad. And I'm just, no. Go ahead, Shannon. You can do two since I didn't do one.
No, I'm going to do none because the thing is I cry at every book. So this is not an interesting answer for me. I like literally laugh out loud and cry out loud at every happy and sad scene. So this is it's not an interesting question for me to answer.
I guess I have an unconventional answer for this one because I was kind of struggling. So How Long Till Black Future Month. I haven't really read any books this year that are tearjerkers necessarily, but I've read a lot of books like this one that just get me really angry about current world stuff, life in general. So some of the stories in here, I don't know if actual tears fell out of my eyes, but I definitely got to that, like, so angry that you start to get emotional or just kind of that frustration at certain things. A lot of the themes in here tapped into very heavy emotional themes. And this is a collection of short stories, by the way, for just for edification. It's fantasy and science fiction. So that was my pick for this, but I haven't had any book that I've really openly sobbed at this year.
That would have been, so I read that in November, so I couldn't count for this list, but the first story in that collection, I actually read the week of the election in the United States, which, was a week we all like to forget about. And when I read that first story, which is such an optimistic story and so hopeful, I actually did have a lot of emotions when I read that first story because it's such a picture of what I want to see, and we feel so far away from it.
Yes. Yeah.
Is this the Omelas story?
It's the first one. It's not one word. Omphalos is Ted Chiang.
No. Omelas, the ones who walk away from Omelas. Is it the ones who stay?
Yeah, it was the response to that.
Yeah, it's based off an Ursula K. Le Guin.
The ones who stay and fight is what it's called.
The ones who stay and fight. Yeah. No, that was such a good response. And I like, if you read that story, definitely read the original Ursula Le Guin one. And there is another response to it that was in Uncanny Magazine issue 24, Disabled People Destroy Science Fiction. That was, yeah, and it's a long, it's a magazine issue.
No, I'm surprised you remember like the issue.
He's been recommending it to me for a while too.
That's the thing. This is like one of my go-to recommendations because I think it is a fantastic issue where it's sci-fi by disabled authors, where there's a bunch of stories and then there's also a bunch of essays, and like it's super good if you want to understand how to think about disability representation in science fiction. Like it's fantastic. And one of the stories is such a fantastic response to the ones who walk away from Omelas, because it takes the perspective of, not to give anything away, but it takes the perspective of the people who are most who have problems in Omelas, and it shows them after that. And it's so good. So I really like those responses.
Yeah, the short story collection is the one N.K. Jemisin I've read, and I don't remember the first. Like, there's a handful of stories that stand out from the collection that I remember, but that's not one that I remember.
It's not one I would have remembered if I hadn't read it in the headspace I was in the minute I picked it up. I don't think, because I didn't know the source material either, so I knew from the introduction it was a response, but just knowing it's a response and you don't know the original is not completely useful. Book that made me happy. I have one for this because I mean, a lot of my books bring me joy, but this is Chaos on Catnet, which is the second book in the Catnet series, which is my favorite palate cleanser, young adult sci-fi thriller series with a sassy AI character. I just scream at the world about this because these are like perfect palate cleanser, read it in a weekend series with great found family. Like in young adult space, we're used to miscommunication trope, like all the time, right? We're used to tension in friend groups. We're used to tensions in relationships. None of the tension is in that here. Here, you just get to have friends being supportive and helpful and funny with each other. And then there's just chaos in the world and it's great. And there's a sassy AI and I just have a lot of fun with them. And so it makes me happy.
I love sassy AIs. I need to read that.
Yeah. This AI created an online server called Catnet where you pay in cat pictures.
Love it.
That's the premise of the AI. Yeah, they're great.
I love
Speaking
it.
of sassy AI, I mean, Murderbot. So Murderbot and is just one of my favorite characters, and I really loved Fugitive Telemetry. I think that the Murderbot series is fantastic, and it always makes me so happy. I loved this one too because it was a murder mystery, and I don't like detective noirs, but I love murder mysteries. And so this was just such a fun ride, and yeah, it just made me so happy.
I also have an unconventional answer for this.
We love unconventional answers.
Woo! Thinking outside the box because I couldn't think of anything inside the box. So I read a lot of comic books on my channel, and I read a lot of superhero comics because I have really bad taste. But I was very excited this year that Poison Ivy and I'm so bad at holding things up on the camera. Nubia. Yeah, really good art. They both got new series, and these are just self-contained graphic novels, so they're not really part of an ongoing series, because these are two characters that I really like that almost never get attention at all. Even though Poison Ivy is like pretty popular, she really doesn't have. I think she's got like one series really where she's the main character. So always great to see that. And then an additional note on the Nubia one, it is written by L.L. McKinney, who is a young adult author, and the entire team on this one, the artist, writer, and colorist were all Black women. So that's great as well. So that's my pick for these.
Nice. Okay, we are almost done. Most beautiful book you bought so far this year or that you received?
All right. I'm staring at 4 options, and it's very, very difficult. What's the last? The last one is books we have to read this year, right? So I can move one of them there. Okay. I think I'm going to go, and this will actually make Jenna happy, so I'll do that. It's Escaping Exodus. So I actually found this at a used bookstore, like brand new. So someone obviously didn't even read this. They just bought it and brought it back, which shame, mainly because I'm so excited for it. But like, look at this art. Like, I don't even, like, I know vaguely what this is about. I know it's going to be a gross, squishy spaceship, but I'm prepared, mainly because I think, Shannon, that's why you DNF'd it. But I've read one Nikki Drayden. It was The Prey of Gods, and they have the potential to be one of my like most fun authors to read because they decide to go wacky and like they do it in a way that works for me.
Yeah.
This one's definitely more sci-fi than The Prey of Gods, although The Prey of Gods is a true genre blender. That one is just future fantasy with gods, but also an AI revolution. So like, yeah. So I really like that one. But runner up to New Suns, which is a short story anthology that is just too pretty to not look at. It has a wraparound cover too with like her hair. And like in the hair, there's all these sci-fi iconography things. And like,
That's cool.
I actually own this on Kindle and I saw it in the wild. And I'm like, well, I guess I should have it.
Those are two of my favorite covers too. And the Nikki Drayden one, like I wanted so badly to continue. So I think it's going to be a really good story, even if it has like some body horror stuff in it.
Yeah. Luckily, I don't visualize it, but like sometimes like squishy texture stuff, like when it's written, I'm like, ooh.
For me, it's Sal and Gabby Break the Universe, which I read this last year and I loved it so much. I don't usually buy physical copies of books unless they're just favorites. But I loved this series so much. And this now kind of has like pride of place on my like special shelf of favorites. And it's just so fun. This is middle grade kind of, I would say like science fantasy. It's contemporary and it's about a boy who can reach into other dimensions. His dad is a scientist. There's like robots and all sorts of tech in this. And it's just such a fun story. I think that the cover does such a good job of giving you a feel of the story. It's like super focused on Cuban American culture. It's middle grade. It's filled with magic and so much humor. And it's got like excellent, kind of role modeling of non-toxic masculinity and all of these really cool things. This book, when I look at it, I just smile because I love it so much.
I will read it. I promise. I'm going to one day, even though I read like 4 middle grades a year, it'll happen.
All right. The ones we're meant to find.
I love that cover. Have you read it yet?
I have.
And it's sci-fi? I don't know.
It is sci-fi.
Oh, cool.
It is sci-fi. It's like dystopian, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this billing, but it's billed as a mix of Studio Ghibli and Black Mirror.
That's an interesting mixture.
Okay, that just means it's dystopian future and Asian. I think that's all they were saying with that.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. But absolutely stunning cover. And this is one of those books that also has a really beautiful interior pages.
Oh, I love when they do that.
And naked heart. Well,
that is really pretty.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
And I don't know, this is the whatever Barnes & Noble special, whatever they call it there. So I don't know if the normal one has all that. I think the only difference is that the Barnes & Noble one has like a shinier cover. That was my understanding. So it's kind of not going to show up on camera, but it has like a pearly sheen to it in person. And then they put like little extras in here as well. I think it's got an interview with the author. I can't remember. It's got something
a standalone or a start of a series? That's something I haven't figured out
This
yet.
is a standalone.
It's about sisters, right?
Yes, it's about 2 sisters. So one of the sisters, she washes up on a island and has no memory of where she came from. The only thing that she knows is that she has a sister and she's trying to get back to her. And then the other sister lives on what's called an eco city, which is basically just a retreat for people who are wealthy or privileged enough to escape from the world because the world has become so polluted and radioactive that it's dangerous to human life. So, and her story gets more into spoilery territory, that sisters. But it does follow these 2 characters. And it is interesting, too, because it has a point of view switch. So the sister on the island, I think, I can't remember which one is which, but one of them is in 3rd person and one is in 1st person. So, which is an interesting little switcheroo, too. I think it's the one on the island is 1st person, if I'm remembering correctly. And then the other one is 3rd person. But don't quote me on that because I can't remember anything ever. I'm not pregnant, but I just can't remember anything.
So,
That is a really beautiful cover, and I am very
Yes.
intrigued by that story or that plot.
did you physically read it or audiobook? Sometimes
Yeah,
okay.
I read it. I don't really read audio or listen to audiobooks. I have a difficulty like processing information auditorially, so I usually will stick to reading it. But yeah, definitely, I would recommend if you're interested in this one, picking it up, because the author of this, she got screwed over on her first book with this whole like publication thing where the publisher essentially never paid her for her book. So, not that that's the only reason why you should buy a book, but like if you're on the fence about picking this one up and you want to show the author some support because that really sucks,
Yeah,
a little extra incentive to get that
I
one.
heard about that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to answer this question, but through doing this tag, I actually have a couple things I want to talk about. Well, one, I want to try and catch up on the Expanse books, which I already mentioned. But actually, for some reason, some of the books you guys were talking about was reminding me of a sci-fi book that I have been meaning to read for a couple of years now, and I just like haven't made it a priority. And I really want to read it before the end of the year. And that is the second book in the Planetfall series by Emma Newman. The first one is Planetfall. I think the second one is like
One of them's a Mars one, but that might be the third.
Yeah, I was gonna say Mars Rising, but that might be the third one. But they're kind of companion books, but then there's like one, I think Atlas something is the second one. Anyways.
Atlas alone might be the fourth, but maybe Atlas something else is the second.
Maybe. Yeah. I think the fourth one is the only one you have to read after having read the third ones. Mm-hmm. If you go to Emma Newman's blog, she has like various reading orders you can pick from, but I want to read them in publication order because that's what I usually do. But I really enjoyed Planetfall, and I don't know if any of you guys have read Emma Newman, but I feel like at least Angela and Shannon, you would like.
I want to read this. I've heard such good things about this series.
There is a little bit of like gross factor to the first one, but it's not that bad. I think you might be able to handle it.
If it's small, I can handle it.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, but I really liked Planetfall a lot. The tech is interesting. The plot is interesting. She has really interesting women characters. Like the protagonist is like I really enjoyed her, and she also does a lot of exploring like mental health in her books. And well, I've only read one, but I've heard it continues in the other ones. And she asks interesting questions, and I really enjoyed the first one, and I feel like she's super underrated. Like people don't talk about her very much. So I wanted to mention her because I especially think that you guys would like her books. And I read the first one in 2019, and because they're companions, I've kind of like been putting off reading the next one, but I think I would like to read the next one before the end of the year because I don't want to go too long. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Nice. I am someone who doesn't think more than like 2 months in the future, but I did buy the Galaxy game by Karen Lord, which is a companion to the Best of All Possible Worlds. And I'm like nervous about it, but I also like bought the really pretty cover that has like a swan in the galaxy. This is another one that looks really mediocre in like US. Actually, I think it might be mediocre in US and UK. They might both be the same.
And which one is that? The US or UK?
This is UK hardback. It kind of matches the aesthetic of this one.
Think so.
Yeah. But this is not going to be the same, and it's based off a character that shows up really quickly in the Best of All Possible Worlds, and they kind of have like a traumatic family thing. So I don't know how much of that might be explored here. I am cautious going into this and just hoping it has her prose that I like, because a lot of people I do know who've read it, which is not a lot. Not many people have read Karen Lord's like more famous works, much less this, have given it only like 3 or 4 stars. So like I'll be okay if it's like a 4-star read. I don't know, but I have it and I want to read it because it's one of those things where, like you were saying, it's not essential that I read it right now, but like it's an author I like, and so I should prioritize it. Like I should do that. I also, like I said, I have Symbiosis as well as Escaping Exodus. I can hold books. I do booktube. So I don't know. I want to read these because they're just very pretty. And the last one that I bought was Docile. So these are just books that are sci-fi on my shelf that I should just like attempt to read because I bought them with the intention to read them.
Mm-hmm. I want to hear what you think of Docile because I've heard real mixed reviews on that.
I've heard mixed things about that too.
I think we'll find out. I think if the writing style is good, I'll be fine. I mean, I'm expecting hard topics. I'm just hoping it doesn't romanticize things because I think it was like mismarketed. I think was the big problem based off what I've heard from some people who have read it. But I don't know.
N.K. Jemisin liked it. So
I mean, I like dark dystopian things. So, and that's what it is. For those who don't know, it's kind of like you have people who have to become sex workers and they can take this drug Docile to forget that experience. But our main character is choosing not to because it messed up their parent, I think. And it goes from there. And I'm sure it's going to be messy, especially in terms of concepts of consent and stuff. But I think it's intentionally meant to be messy. And I'm hoping it's like that. Like I can handle problematic topics being explored. I think it's cool to explore those. I just don't like when they're being explored and the author agrees with the problematic issue, if that makes sense. Like I think that's, I don't know. But we'll see. I'm hoping it's a page turner, even though it's like really thick. Like what I want from it is to be like a page turner dystopia. So it's like almost, it's not quite 500 pages. It's 492, including the acknowledgements. So those are things I'd like to read, but I don't really care that much either. So
for me, for the end of the year, the only things like super on my radar are reading for the Hugo Awards. So there's a couple of books that I still need to read for that. And then also a couple of buddy reads. So the next one that I have coming up is Rosewater by Tade Thompson. So I'm supposed to buddy read this in August. And this is set in Lagos, Nigeria. It's kind of like a sci-fi future where aliens have come and they've set up these, I don't know what to call it, like pods, I guess, where they are. So they're not like interacting with humans, I think, but that little, those pods, every once in a while, if you go to them, you can have miracles happen to you. And so, but there's some other stuff in here. So I think this is maybe a little bit of a mystery. And like with mysteries, I don't want to go in knowing too much. So don't know exactly, but I've heard really cool things about this. And just, I really like sci-fi that's set in different parts of the real world so that you get kind of that exploration of that part of the world as well as the sci-fi ideas. So I'm really excited about this one.
I'm excited too, because I just read Lagoon, which is also like a first contact in Lagos by Nydia Okorafor. So I thought that was cool. It keeps being on sale for like $6 at my bookstore, so I keep almost buying it, but I have no clue if I'll like it. And it's a trilogy, not a standalone. So like, it's a, I don't know, because I'm the type of person who needs to own all of them if I decide to own one, and it's just, you know, slippery slip.
I'm the same way.
I'm very much a mood reader, so this is a need in the loosest sense of the definition. So I just was kind of poking around Goodreads and basically just chose a science fiction book that I really want to read, which is Tender is the Flesh. Yeah, that's been getting a lot of attention lately. It sounds extremely disturbing, so I'm intrigued. Which is, okay, so it's a dystopian, and it's about a world where there's been some kind of disease on animals that makes them inedible to humans. So we can no longer eat meat. And the solution to that is that humans now, some humans have been designated to be made into meat for consumption by other humans. So just based on that premise, I'm guessing that this is going to be a really heavy.
I feel like that's not really like the logical next step. Like,
I think we are ignoring like the whole idea of veganism. Yeah, I think we're ignoring a little bit of some stuff.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
This is Argentinian, right?
To see like what the explanation is in the story is like why that was the decision made.
Yeah.
But I've got a few theories as to
it might be Argentinian. The name for sure could be
translated.
I know that it's translated. I thought
a lot of like body horror though.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm never gonna read this one.
Yeah.
I heard reviews of it. So, but
I mean, the
heard,
last
like,
name is Basterica, so I don't know that sounds like probably somewhere in South America, but I can't tell the country based off that.
Yeah, I know it's,
from the Shades of
from-
Orange gave it 5 stars and said this has to be one of the most brutal and disturbing novels I have ever read, and I absolutely love it. And she's a horror reader, so
That's basically what I've heard from the people who I know who like sci-fi and like horror and like especially Latinx stuff. You know, I've heard that they love it, but it's
obviously not going to be for everyone.
It's only 224 pages though, so it's like it's not quick maybe, but it's like in and out in terms of page count.
yeah.
It looks very interesting. So I'm really want to get to that one hopefully this year.
Nice. Well, we have rambled a lot, but I have loved all the books. I've added like 7 books to my story.
Oh yeah,
it's atrocious.
I always got Goodreads open in one tab and the conversation in the other.
I'm intrigued with Tender is the Flesh in the same way that I'm intrigued with Docile. It's like, oh, this is like not a world I want to actually be in, but like when I'm feeling like the dark stuff, I want to go there.
Yeah. All right, we made it to the end. It's a really long tag. I'm glad we ended up with just us. Like, I tried to get a few more people, but because we're filming this on Father's Day, not that that matters, but it was hard to get people, but it ended up being perfect because we talked a lot. And I definitely heard about a lot of books that I want to read now, so which I always do from these lovely people, which is why I invited them to be in this episode. So thanks everybody who joined us and everyone who is watching. Leave us some comments down below answering some of these questions, and we'd love to hear your sci-fi answers. And until next time, I was trying to do like my own personal channel outro. We'll catch you guys later. Bye.